We're in the midst of the offseason and camps are quickly approaching, but who are the big dogs in the AFC this upcoming season? Five through one, let's run it. Starting things off at number 5, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. Last year, 2022, was incredibly impressive for the Jacksonville Jaguars, adding new head coach Doug Peterson and of course Trevor Lawrence, the former #1 overall pick. The rookie year squandered by Urban Meyer and his staff, but Doug Peterson quickly righting the ship and maximizing and making the most of the Jacksonville Jaguars' potential. And going into this upcoming season, the Jaguars have added an electrifying weapon in Calvin Ridley, formerly of the Atlanta Falcons, who spent a year suspended because of some off-the-field issues when it came to gambling. But back this upcoming season, Calvin Ridley looks like he's going to be a huge addition for these Jacksonville Jaguars, who last year already had a very potent and explosive offense when it came to the likes of Christian Kirk, when it came to the likes of Travis Etienne, Evan Ingram, and company. Now, the biggest loss for the Jacksonville Jaguars being Jawan Taylor, taking his talents elsewhere to play with the Kansas City Chiefs over in Missouri. But the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think their biggest hole, so to speak, it's really more or less just a question mark right now. It's trying to figure out what Walker Little has. Can he fill in at that right tackle spot for the Jacksonville Jaguars offense? Now, defensively, this unit still needs some work overall, but as it stands right now, they're the dominant force in the AFC South. The Tennessee Titans are regressing. The Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts are both developing and trying to rebuild their entire organizations as we speak. So, uncontested within their own division, a very explosive offense, an improving defensive unit. I think the Jaguars are set up very well for success. They're my number 5 team in the hierarchy. Number 4, and maybe a shock to some of you, but I got the Buffalo Bills at number 4. A little bit of high and a little bit of low for the Buffalo Bills. Do I think the Buffalo Bills are still probably the team to beat within the AFC East? I think so. They have a very solid and well-rounded roster from all angles. Adding Dalton Kincaid in this year's NFL draft is a huge bonus for an offense that is very reliant upon the passing game. Obviously, Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, your primary number 1 and number 2 wide receivers, and then Dawson Knox, the primary tight end. But Dalton Kincaid, what he is going to bring to this offense is kind of that slot tight end hybrid. I think they're going to use him in a lot of different packages. You don't draft a guy like that out of round 1 if he isn't something special. So I think they're going to do quite a bit with Dalton Kincaid. I think he's going to see his fair share of targets, probably quite a little bit of fantasy value on those bye weeks, right? But that aside, the backfield, adding Damian Harris to go alongside of James Cook. The offensive line, one of my favorite NFL prospects going into this year's NFL draft, adding Osiris Torrance to the interior of the offensive line. A big criticism for the Buffalo Bills going into this offseason was how are they going to address the offensive line. I think adding Osiris Torrance there is a huge addition to this offensive line unit. And then defensively, getting back Von Miller is going to be huge for the pass rush. The rest of the defense is very well rounded. The biggest hole and arguably the biggest weakness for these Buffalo Bills going into this upcoming season is the loss of Tremaine Edmonds, who took his talents to Chicago to play with the Bears. So that's really just their biggest question at the moment. And their biggest flaw, I would say, the biggest chink in the armor, so to speak, for the Buffalo Bills is the turnover margin. Now, the Bills' defense last year was able to secure a lot of turnovers, able to give the ball back to their offense, but the weak link really was Josh Allen's inability to play responsibly with the football. If the Buffalo Bills want to consider themselves a Super Bowl caliber team, I think they have to get the turnovers under control. But as it stands, very talented and probably going to lead the AFC East, even though it's gotten a lot more competitive. They're the number 4 team in my AFC hierarchy. Number 3, it's the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson got paid. He got a weapon in Odell Beckham Jr., and he also got another weapon in Zay Flowers in this year's NFL draft. Now, Odell Beckham Jr. coming off of the ACL injury, spending an entire year last year to rehab and get the knee correct. Going into this upcoming season, the question marks are abundant as far as his general health and his general longevity. Odell has had a number of issues staying on the field throughout his career, but I loved the move that they made to get Zay Flowers, mixing him into a rotation where you have some question marks with injury history with OBJ as well as Rashad Bateman. I think Zay Flowers is outside of those question marks. Obviously a rookie adapting to the NFL level and adapting to NFL speed, but he was one of my favorite guys in this year's NFL draft. I love that he went to Baltimore, a team that needs some outside receiving threat weapons for Lamar Jackson. They got a very solid offensive line, generally speaking. The running game is always going to be there with Lamar's talent. So the offense, I think it has a lot of potential this year. Mark Andrews, of course, not to be forgotten, one of the better tight ends in the NFL. Lamar Jackson's probably his favorite target within this offense, a very reliable set of hands, a very good red zone target. So offensively, the biggest question and the biggest potential Achilles heel for the Baltimore Ravens is going to be just health, right? Lamar Jackson has not finished the last 2 seasons healthy after his MVP campaign, and it has played a little bit of a detriment to the Baltimore Ravens Super Bowl title hopes. And obviously Odell Beckham, injury history. Rashad Bateman, injury history. Mark Andrews last year struggled to stay on the field at times as well. So injuries are going to be the biggest question mark that I have for the Baltimore Ravens going into this upcoming season. But defensively, I do like this unit overall. The front seven is usually very strong and very stout under head coach John Harbaugh. They do a very good job of playing aggressive and keeping opposing quarterbacks on their toes and making things very uncomfortable. In the secondary, you've got Kyle Hamilton, who's a very bright, young potential star in the secondary. You've obviously got Marlon Humphrey, a former All-Pro, Marcus Williams. So there are a lot of very good pieces on this defense. And of course, right there in the middle, commanding everything, Roquan Smith entering his second season with the Baltimore Ravens. So the Ravens right now, my number 3 team in the AFC hierarchy. I have a lot of hope that this team is going to be very good this upcoming season. Number 2, the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals have been right there in the mix over the last few seasons when it comes to Lombardi Trophy contention. When you've got Joe Burrow, when you've got T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon, all on an offense together, that just spells a lot of offensive potential. And they addressed the biggest issue that they had on the squad by getting Orlando Pace from the Kansas City Chiefs, getting him this offseason, securing the left side, that anchor point of the offensive line is going to pay major dividends in an effort to keep Joe Burrow upright and keep his jersey as clean as possible. The biggest problem for the Cincinnati Bengals since Joe Burrow has come into the league has been keeping him healthy, keeping him upright, and keeping him comfortable. The more time you give Joe Burrow to sit back in the pocket and deliver footballs to this incredibly talented skill group that he has around him, the more that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to be winning. Now, with the signing of Orlando Brown comes the downside of where did they lose that, right? Where did that money go that they lost? I think in the secondary that was already pretty heavily scrutinized, losing Jesse Bates to the Atlanta Falcons. That's a big blow for your defense. So swinging a little bit more towards the offensive side of the football, getting Orlando, losing Jesse Bates, it kind of pays 1-to-1 a little bit more so maybe on the offensive side. But I think the Bengals made up for it. I think getting Myles Murphy out of Clemson in the first round is a huge swing of the bat, so to speak, for the Cincinnati Bengals. I really like Myles Murphy coming out of Clemson. I think he's very raw at the moment. Didn't spend quite as much time in college as some of the other prospects going into this year's NFL draft, but the flashes that you can see on tape, the potential is really there for this guy to be a super special Pro Bowl level talent. If the Bengals can just hone that in, I think they've got a really special, very talented guy that's going to fit very well into an already very solid pass rush. And then number 1, of course, who else is it going to be? It's got to be the Kansas City Chiefs. You've got the best quarterback in the NFL right now, the face of the league in Patrick Mahomes, and arguably the best head coach in the NFL right now in Andy Reid. They've now won their second Super Bowl together. This team is coached incredibly well from top to bottom. Obviously, the offense runs through Andy Reid, and he has always been a very offensive-minded head coach, has made the most out of the offensive talents that he has. Obviously, outside of Mahomes, you've got Travis Kelce and a very strong offensive line with guys like Creed Humphrey, Joe Thuney, and now adding Jawan Taylor, formerly of the Jacksonville Jaguars, to fill the hole left behind by Orlando Brown. And then outside of even that, the receiving core, only losing Juju Smith-Schuster, but you still got some solid talents out there as well. Sky Moore, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, those guys are going to play key roles for the Kansas City Chiefs going into this upcoming season. And what Mahomes was able to do with a receiving core that is arguably the weakest he's had since he's come into the NFL, putting up an MVP caliber season, it's just insane. The kid is, the trajectory is unreal for Patrick Mahomes. But outside of even the offense, let's take a look at the defense being spearheaded by defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo, storied defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo. He has made the most of this unit. Chris Jones, obviously the gem of this defense, sitting right there in the middle of the interior defensive line, a massive pass rusher, was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate just this past season. And in the second level, you've got Nick Bolton, one of the more underrated linebackers and defenders in this entire NFL at the moment. George Karlaftis, a huge piece for them on the outside edge. I think they probably love what he's got there for them to move off of Frank Clark. And then in the secondary, of course, you've got guys like Trent McDuffie, who they drafted last year as well. So they just have some rising stars, some rising talent, some guys that they were developing, that they're cooking on, that I think the Kansas City Chiefs, with Steve Spagnuolo at defensive coordinator, are going to maximize their abilities. They're going to put themselves in a position to win football games. And right now, to be the best, you gotta beat the best, and nobody has been able to beat the Kansas City Chiefs, at least not consistently, over the last few years. Right now, they're the #1 team for me in the AFC, and I don't think that's much of a shock. There were a few teams on the outside looking in that I did want to give some honorable mentions to at the end of the video. The New York Jets, adding Aaron Rodgers is absolutely massive and makes the AFC East that much more competitive. As well as the Miami Dolphins. The biggest thing that's impacting them at the moment, in my opinion, is health. H-E-A-L-T-H, right? Staying healthy is going to be the name of the game for the Miami Dolphins. They've got a lot of talent. They're a very exciting football team. Obviously, adding Jalen Ramsey this offseason is huge. So if the Miami Dolphins can stay healthy to keep things interesting, I think the New England Patriots, man, they had their work cut out for them. They had their work cut out for them going into this upcoming season. The AFC East, as competitive as it ever has been. And another team that I don't think is creeping up on a lot of people's radars, but the Cleveland Browns, Deshaun Watson, getting a full camp, getting a full season, is finally back into, well, football mode, so to speak, right? Back on the field, Deshaun Watson, for whatever your feelings are about him off the field, still a very talented football player of the past. So if he can come in and be the guy that he was in Houston for these Cleveland Browns, I think the Browns could very well be a very sneaky team going into this upcoming season. Thank you so much for watching the video. Like, comment, share, subscribe, get the bell on. My name's Tristan Blake Rines. I'll catch you in the next one. Adios.